Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a potential Gulf Coast hurricane which may impact parts of the Florida Panhandle, parts of southern Alabama, southern Mississippi, and also parts of southeastern Louisiana with some hurricane force wind speeds and also quite a bit of rainfall as it's going to stall out over those areas potentially over a period of about 1 to 2 days. So we'll talk about all of that and more in today's video. So let's get right into it here and let's start off with your current National Weather Service page. We see that we do have some dense smoke advisories, I do believe, over or dense fog advisories and smoke advisories over parts of Washington and Oregon, a little bit of Idaho there, and also for a little bit of California. We also see some frost and freeze advisories for parts of northern Maine, northern New Hampshire, and northeastern Vermont, which I did actually mention could potentially go up for those areas in my previous videos. I did say be on the lookout for some frost and freeze watches to go up for those areas. You're going to have overnight lows in the 30s and 20s in some spots over those regions. And then we have some flood watches for Invest 96L, which could potentially become Sally, which is going to kind of move kind of something like this and return back into the Gulf of Mexico, and that's why we have those flood watches currently in effect for those regions. So let's get right into it here. Let's start off with your current 5-day graphical outlook. We have 4 areas to watch, 2 tropical storms currently in the Atlantic. Both of those tropical storms expected to become hurricanes. Over further to the left of your screen, or the western side of this picture here, we're looking at a disturbance has a 30% chance of developing. That'll move south and westward into parts of Mexico, bringing quite a bit of rainfall to those regions. Now, this disturbance, Invest 96L, currently has an 80% chance of developing, and this really surprised me when I looked at the current update of the National Hurricane Center. They showed an 80% chance. Yesterday, when I was making my video, this had about a 40% chance of developing into some sort of storm. So they've really upped the chances here very, very quickly. Now, we see Paulette and Renee there, and then also we see that next red shaded area, which currently has a 90% chance of developing. If I'm not mistaken, that is Invest 95L, and then we have Disturbance 4, which currently has a 40% chance of developing in that orange region east of Hurricane or Tropical Storm Renee, excuse me there. So here is current Tropical Storm Paulette and how it's looking like. Currently, it has maximum sustained winds of about 55 knots, minimum pressure of about 990 millibars, located at 23.2 degrees west by about 51.7 degrees west. Or actually 23.2 degrees north by 51.7 degrees west. So here's the cone track for this. It is gonna move to the north and west, but then it'll abruptly make a north and east turn from there. So not really an impact to any land. Something that really surprised me with the recent updates from the National Hurricane Center as well is Renee. Yesterday they were expecting it to kind of just loop out. Now they've actually made a kind of a westward turn. It kind of looks a little bit odd on the picture here, but if this westward turn continues, maybe we look at an impact for Bermuda or maybe somewhere along the east coast. We'll have to talk about that a little bit more as we move on with time and as we get closer to that. Now, Renee currently at about 20.3 degrees north by 39.9 degrees west, maximum sustained winds of about 40 miles per hour, minimum central pressure of about 1,004 millibars, moving west-northwest at 13 miles per hour right now. So let's get into Invest 95L or actually Invest 96L potential Hurricane Sally if this really does intensify. Now, here's the current infrared satellite loop. Currently, it is located at 25 degrees north by about 78 degrees west. Maximum sustained winds of about 25 knots. Minimum central pressure of about 1,011 millibars. So here is the track from the SOL model that we have currently going, and this is kind of in agreement with what I've seen with a lot of the models. They think that this will move up the west side of Florida, and then it should kind of curve, not making impact with the Big Bend of Florida. It will make impact with those regions, but it won't landfall there. At least most models don't think it will. It'll actually continue moving westward, and so that'll prolong its time period over water. And most of these storms, or most of these models, have the northern side of this storm being the strongest, while the southern side of this storm being the weakest. the weaker side. So the more that it's paralleling the coast, that means that the northern side is on land, which means that the northern side is going to be impacting the coastal regions. That means that we are going to be seeing probably the worst impacts actually onshore, even though the storm is still intensifying because the center of low pressure is still on water. So a lot to unravel here, and this is why I potentially think this is a major thing that we have to watch. Now, here is the GEFS tracks, and most of them in pretty good agreement, but they are a little bit pushed a little bit to the south. Now, here would be your model intensity guidance. About 4 out of the 5 models currently bring this to at least a tropical storm, and 3 out of the 5 models bring this to at least a Category 1 hurricane at some point in its lifespan. Now, let's start looking at some of the models. We're going to look at the HWRF, the HMON, and then also the GFS model, and then we'll look at some of the environmental conditions because they are very favorable for development. So let's get right into it here. We're going to go in 12-hour increments, and then as we approach the landfall, we'll start to slow it down a little bit, and we'll go in 6-hour increments by that point. So here we are. This would be by Saturday night, now going into Sunday morning. So this is in the next 2 days is when we're seeing this, and that's why I've been so surprised that the models just haven't picked up on this quicker than they have. It's just because there's so many storms out in the Atlantic. It's really hard for these models to really grasp what's happening. Now, we see this would be by Sunday morning, the 13th of September, and then as we get into Sunday night, this is when it's really starting to impact parts of the Big Bend of Florida, and it'll eventually move into parts of Alabama and Mississippi. Now, this would probably be probably in the middle of all the models, so it's not as intense as some of the models, but it's also not as weak as some of the models. The GFS would probably be the weakest, and the HMON would probably be the strongest of all the models that I've seen so far. Now, here would be, this would be by Monday, right around midnight or so in the early morning time, and we're looking at quite a bit of heavy and strong winds. Anywhere in the greens, that's tropical storm force, so all around here, you're seeing tropical storm force winds, but as you get into those little shades of purple that are indicated here, that is hurricane force, so that's Category 1 force. So we are seeing some areas where you're seeing Category 1 force by this point, but still they are scattered and most likely with individual thunderstorms within this big hurricane. Now, as we continue, it starts to weaken a little bit just because some of the outer bands of the storm are moving onshore, but it will strengthen. This would be by Monday morning. Now look at, this would be by Monday, probably as you're eating lunch, and you're seeing quite a bit of very strong winds that are approaching a high-end tropical storm onshore for the Panhandle of Florida. And look at this now. You don't see a lot of these really strong winds. Here's the low pressure center, and on the southern side, you really don't see too much activity in the form of winds or high winds. But look at the northern side of the storm, really pummeling parts of the Panhandle of Florida and southernmost Alabama there, and southernmost Mississippi with some very strong winds. Now, the problem with this storm is that it's paralleling the coast. So if it stays close enough to the coast where it's making impact with the coast, and it's just paralleling it, staying offshore, so the center is offshore, but some of those outer bands that are producing quite a bit of strong winds are still onshore. That's really a big issue. Now, also look at these wind barbs. Now, the storm is moving clockwise here, so it's moving like this. So what you're seeing is that because of the Big Bend of Florida, if we move this back a little bit, you would have seen on the previous frame that the storm is located somewhere right around here. So all that water is actually being pushed right into this little crescent right here, so that would really cause some flooding issues, especially across the coastal communities of parts of Florida there. So that's something that is really worrying me with this system, is how the geography is really playing a factor into the storm, and how the way these winds are going to be moving, pummeling all this water into one little kind of bowl for this water to move through. It's really not going to be a good recipe. It's probably going to be a recipe for disaster if this really kind of intensify. Now, here would be by this would be by Monday night, and then here would be by Tuesday early in the morning, and southern Mississippi now feeling the brunt of this storm with those hurricane force wind speeds onshore. Again, look at the southern side of the system where you don't have those hurricane force wind speeds, so the northern side is really where you're seeing a lot of that intensification. Now, as we continue, here would be by Tuesday morning, and then by Tuesday evening or afternoon. Now let's start looking at the HMON model. model and what it's showing. This one is even stronger, and then we'll look at the weakest of the models that I've seen so far, which would be the GFS model. Now, here is going to be by Sunday morning. Now, this would be by Sunday night, and you're starting to see some isolated areas of tropical storm force winds, but I don't think by this point you would see the National Hurricane Center name this. Now, I think it'll be named probably by this period or sometime in between the last frame and the frame I'm showing you right now, because now you're starting to see some of those tropical storm wind speeds kind of envelop the storm. Previously you didn't see that, and by this point you're developing an eye on the system. Now look at this, the HMON by this point, and this would be by Monday morning, September 14th, and we're looking at very strong winds that are nearing hurricane force or at hurricane force just offshore Florida, and in some scenarios actually impacting parts of Florida by this point. Now let's continue here, and also notice what I've been showing you, what I showed you on the previous model run, the HWRF. Look at these winds that are kind of going straight into the Big Bend of Florida, and that'll cause some real flooding issues where all the waves, those very high waves, are kind of pushing straight into the Big Bend of Florida. That is going to cause some serious flooding issues if that is to be correct. Now you're already at most likely hurricane force, maybe even Category 2 force by this point. Now here would be by Monday, September 14th in the evening, and we are looking at still a quite robust system. Now it's going to weaken a little bit, but then it'll strengthen again by the next frame. This would be by Tuesday morning, and it's really developed an eye by this point. And then as we continue here, to be by Tuesday afternoon and evening, and we're looking at still a very strong storm. This would be by Tuesday evening, most likely a Category 2 by this point. Some wind speeds over 100 knots by this point, so that is over about 110 miles per hour, so maybe even Category 3 by this point. And we are looking at, this would be by Wednesday early in the morning, and we're looking at a landfall potentially in the westernmost portion of the panhandle of Florida. We'll have to see about that. Some models bring this landfalling into Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. We'll still have to see. That's something that we have to iron out over the next couple of days. This would be by Wednesday early in the morning, and then here would be by Wednesday morning as you're starting to wake up, and you're seeing quite a bit of heavy and strong winds on shore by this point. So this would again move inland a little bit more, but it'll start to weaken by that point. So here would be the GFS model, and this is the weakest of them all. Now the GFS model, the color table is a little bit different. The greens indicate tropical depression force, and then the yellows and the oranges indicate tropical storm force, and then the lightest pinks, that indicates some of those hurricane force. So we don't see any hurricane force or even tropical storm force by this point. This would be by Sunday morning, and we are looking at just some tropical depression winds by this point. And as you continue through the model, you really don't see anything too significant, and this would be probably the best scenario, or the best case scenario for the storm if it were to continue like this, like what the GFS is showing. And you see it just progresses westward, not doing too much. Now let's start looking at some of the environmental conditions with the storm. Very warm over much of the Gulf of Mexico where this is going to be forming, so if it does move offshore, it'll definitely not have any problems strengthening. Here are the actual sea surface temperatures, and they're all above 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius. Now let's start looking at some of the deep layer wind shear in the upper atmosphere, a couple thousand feet over our heads, and we're looking at not a lot of wind shear. Now here's where the storm would be by this point. This is over the next 12 hours, so this would be by tonight, and we're looking at a clear path for the storm where you have minimal wind shear at all throughout this region, where you have wind shear of maybe 20 knots at some of the highest levels. So really not an issue with wind shear. And if you look at the relative humidity, a couple thousand feet up in the atmosphere, and this shows you the best representation of the moisture, you see zero dry air infiltrating the core of the system. And even if you were to play this through, you would see no dry air really infiltrating. You do see a little bit of dry air right here and also to the west of the storm, but this won't impact it. The only dry air that you really have to contend with is right here, and even that is modestly dry air, so it's not anything that's going to be too crazy and something that the storm cannot intensify under. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.